But the people who were buying real estate and are still buying real estate were making the exact same mistakes that people made in the stock market. They were not basing their investment decision based on the fundamental value of the asset. They were basing it on the belief that prices would rise, on the belief that there would always be a greater fool willing to accept more losses because there was no such, real estate would always go up. It was a sure thing. Just buy it. It doesn't matter what you pay for it. It doesn't matter what the rent is because it's always going to appreciate. In fact, when I used to talk to potential clients in 1997 and 98 and 99 and tell them that the NASDAQ was going to lose 80 and 90% of its value, people thought that there's no way that that could possibly happen. I mean, people used to even tell me the government won't let that happen. Well, it happened. A lot of people today in the real estate market have the same idea when I tell them that property prices are going to drop 50, 60, 70, 80%. They don't think it can happen. They don't think the government will let it happen. Well, it happened in the stock market, and it's going to happen in the real estate market. Ultimately, Greenspan started to raise interest rates and take away that monetary stimuli that he had supplied during the 90s. And eventually, the bubble burst. The NASDAQ lost 80% of its nominal value. Where are we now? Well, over the next year or two, you've got about $2 trillion of adjustable rate mortgages that are going to reset. Now, where are homeowners going to get the money to make these mortgage payments? It's not like they're sitting on a pile of cash. They're spending 40% of their income on their mortgage now at the low rate. How are they going to afford to make these payments when the rate's 8% or 9%? A lot of people are going to lose their jobs because Americans are struggling to make mortgage payments instead of spending money on what they're spending it on now. We're going to have a very severe recession as a result of that contraction of consumer spending. Also, Americans are going to have to rebuild their savings, replenish their savings. For the last 5 or 6 years, a lot of Americans felt, why save? I own a house. I don't need to save. In fact, a lot of Americans said, I don't even need a job, I own a house. You go out to California, about 2 years ago, the average person buying a home in California believed that that house was going to appreciate by 20% a year for 10 years. Now, the average price at the time was $500,000, which meant that that person buying that house believed that he was going to earn $100,000 a year for the next 10 years, actually not more than that, appreciation, actually $3 million over 10 years, because that's what 20% compounded for 10 years would take a $500,000 house and turn it into a $3 million house. So the average person in California who maybe made $50,000 or $60,000 a year believed that by buying a house, he was going to have an extra $250,000 a year in income just because he owned a house. Why even have a job? You know, people used to buy a house because they can afford it. Now they buy a house because they need the money. And if you need more money, you buy a vacation house. People forget that real estate depreciates, that houses have to be maintained, that they cost money. They forgot that when they were speculating. In fact, the people who were buying real estate made the exact same mistakes as the people who were buying stocks. You know, when people were buying stocks in the 1990s, the reason they lost money was not because stocks are bad investments. If you buy a stock at the right price, it's a good investment. The reason they lost money is because they forgot. They overpaid for stocks. It's overpaying for stocks that makes them a bad investment. How do you know you're overpaying? Well, you look at the dividend yield. If you don't get a good dividend, then you're overpaying for the stock. Well, how do you know if you're overpaying for real estate? You look at the rents. And the rent's not just supposed to cover your expenses. You don't invest to break even. You can get 5% in a government bond, right? If you can't get 7 or 8 or 9% return on a piece of property, then you're overpaying. Well, what's been happening in California and other parts of the country, investors, and they're really speculators, were buying property. Not only was there no investment return, but there was negative cash flow. People would buy a piece of property and pay $1 million for it, where the rents that they could collect were less than the mortgage payments on the property, or the taxes, or the maintenance. Less. Now, why were they doing that? Well, because they figured they would make it up on the appreciation. But they didn't bother to ask themselves, why should an asset that's so overpriced that it produces a negative return, why should that asset appreciate? It just should collapse. But the people who were buying real estate and are still buying real estate were making the exact same mistakes that people made in the stock market. They were not basing their investment decision based on the fundamental value of the asset. They were basing it on the belief that prices would rise, on the belief that there would always be a greater fool willing to accept more losses because there was no such, real estate would always go up. It was a sure thing. Just buy it. It doesn't matter what you pay for it. It doesn't matter what the rent is, because it's always going to appreciate. Well, people are now starting to find out that that's not going to happen. And also, you know, one of the reasons people say, well, prices are just going to level off. That's impossible. Prices can't level off. It's like I can't hold a balloon up in the air, a beach ball up in the air like this, and take my hand away and expect the ball to stay there. Why did they get so high in the first place? Why did they get there? Well, they got there because of the artificially low interest rates that existed. Well, those artificially low interest rates are not there anymore. Rates are still not high, but they're not nearly as low as they were. And without those very low rates, these prices are impossible because people can't get payments that low. Of course, a lot of property is going to be coming on the market over the next year or two because, as I said, when these adjustable rate mortgages reset, a lot of people are going to be in a situation where they can't make these payments. Even if they cut back everywhere, they can't make these payments. And of course, a lot of them are going to be unemployed if they happen to work in the service sector and they've lost their jobs because other people have cut back. So a lot of properties are going to come on the market. If you think there's a high inventory now, wait a while. Who's going to buy these properties if there's no credit flowing? And if you look at a chart, you go back like 100 years, and you look at the price of houses in the United States until 2000, it matched the CPI. That's basically all that happened is housing prices basically stayed even with the CPI. It wasn't until 2000 it went off the charts. In America, we're indulging ourselves, or we have indulged ourselves, in the present at the expense of the future. And what are we borrowing this money for? We're not borrowing it for the same things that we borrowed it for as a nation 100 years ago or 200 years ago. We're borrowing money to buy imported consumer goods. We're buying money for non-productive, depreciating consumer goods. Or we're borrowing money to just buy food or gasoline. We're borrowing money to take vacations, to remodel our kitchens, to put granite countertops in there. All this stuff is going to have to be paid. American consumers are now loaded up with debt. And the very nature of that debt, you know, a lot of people in this room understand that because you're in the mortgage industry. You know how many people own adjustable rate mortgages and how many people have been able to extract equity from their houses as they've been appreciating. The fact of the matter is the economy hasn't been humming. All we've been doing is going on a consumption binge, just like the heroin addict. These numbers are false. All they're measuring is how much wealth we're dissipating, not how much we're producing. We're borrowing money from the Japanese and the Chinese to buy the products that they produced on credit. We're going to go through a painful correction. Anybody that thinks that we're going to go from such a wide, out-of-whack imbalance, and all of a sudden we're just going to turn a little switch and it's going to be like a little, you know, not a big deal, is fooling themselves. It's, you know, just like when people told me, when I said the NASDAQ's going to drop 80 to 90%, and of course I was right. Oh, no, it's only going to go down 10% or 15%. No way. We are way out of balance. We're not going to have a little mild recession. This is a major economic contraction that's coming, and the real estate market and the mortgage market is right in the forefront.
Big question. Will homes be worth more or less in 2007? Tom, what do you think?
You're going to see prices go up about 10%. Here's why. Because you're going to come into a regular, normal market, and a regular, normal market, that's about what kind of appreciation you get.
Home prices up 10% in the coming year. Peter, what do you say?
Well, today's home prices are completely unsustainable. They were bid up to these artificial heights by a combination of temporarily low adjustable rate mortgage payments, by a complete, absence of any lending standards, and by speculative buying. And what's going to happen in 2007 is a lot of these artificially low ARM payments are going to be reset upward. You're going to start to see both the government and the lenders reimposing lending standards and tightening up on credit, and you're going to see a lot of the speculative buyers turn into sellers. sellers, and these sky-high real estate prices are going to come crashing back down to earth.
First of all, I have no idea what Peter Schiff is talking about. I agree with Tom. I think they're going to be probably up to about 10%. What artificial lending standard are you talking about?
What's word to Peter?
Most of the profits that people have in real estate are going to vanish, just like the profits in the dot-coms in 1999-2000. It's a fantasy. People can't sell their house. The inventories are exploding all over the country. Houses are on the market for 6 months a year. There's no bidders. The prices are going to fall through the floor. You guys are deluding yourselves.
We heard it loud and clear from all of our panelists. We thank you very much.
Einstein, you say this could be a perfect storm for buyers. What do you mean?
I mean that the credit crunch is way overblown. The financials are being given away. They're so unbelievably cheap. Many of the resource companies have gotten really whacked and are cheap at this point. The subprime problem is a problem, but it's a tiny problem in the context of this economy. The storm is a problem, but it's a tiny problem. Meanwhile, it's as if nuclear war has struck the financials and really struck the whole market. It's a buying opportunity, especially for the financials, maybe that I've never seen before in my entire life.
Trace, this is just getting started. It's not just subprime. You know, this is a problem for the entire mortgage industry. It's not just people with bad credit that committed to mortgages they can't afford. It's not just people with bad credit who are going to see their home equity vanish. And it's not limited to mortgage credit. Americans are going to have a difficult time borrowing money to buy cars, to buy furniture, to buy appliances. Dollars down.
But subprime is tiny. Subprime is a tiny, tiny blip.
It's not tiny, and again, it's not just subprime. It's the entire mortgage market, right?
All right. Well, Tracy, you're disagreeing.
You're simply wrong. Well, you're simply wrong about that.
No, I'm not.
You're simply wrong.
To Ben's point,
defaults for the whole mortgage market are tiny.
No, but it's good. Just give it time. Wait till all these mortgages reset.
Yet to come. Charles, you were just speaking. What do you think?
I think volatility is going to be here until we can look at the books of major financials, so that means until the next round of earnings, but I think the worst is over.
Ben?
Well, I think stocks will be a heck of a lot higher a year from now than they are now.
Tracy?
Yeah, but we have more volatility to go, at least through September.
Stuart?
The big banks, the central banks, still have plenty of big guns to fire. They'll fire them when necessary. The worst is over.
Peter, meanwhile, I guess razor blades are in order?
The worst is yet to come. The fundamentals are not sound. They're awful. If the fundamentals were sound, we wouldn't be having these problems.